Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the Center for the Less Good Idea. My name is Muyanga, and I'm going to introduce you to our featured guests tonight, writers, poets from different parts of the world. We have Stacy Hardy, Daniel Borzutzky. I almost said Zubotsky. Daniel Borzutzky, and Fred Schmalz. Stacy is from another planet called Saturn. Daniel and Fred are both visiting from Chicago, and they've been working on a project which is quite unusual, I thought. Writers writing together one text. So tonight we're going to have what we call here at the center an in-conversation, and we will include some reading of the text, but also we will have a conversation between us, and then at the end I'll open up to a question and answer session with you on the floor. We will start, however, with Daniel giving us a short introduction to the text and how it all came to be.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. I'll read a few words from Muriel Rukeyser's The Book of the Dead, as this was a kind of central piece for us in the creation of the Breathers. What one word must never be said, dead. And these men fight off our dying, cough in the theaters of war. What cannot be said, what cannot be seen, what cannot be done? Where does language fail us? What do we have no words for? What bodies are allowed and not allowed to speak? What obfuscates these bodies? How does disease eat away at them? How does disease eat away at their ability to breathe? And how does breathing constitute a reparative act of resistance? What cannot be done to save the diseased bodies or to save the bodies from becoming diseased? How does labor kill? How does policy fail? How does the very agenda of human rights fail to prevent the deterioration of bodies due to the imperialist agendas of unregulated capitalism? These questions sit at the center of the Book of the Dead. Muriel Rukeyser, her seminal work of documentary poetry about the Hawks Nest tunnel disaster in West Virginia in the 1930s, where unregulated mining practices led to lung disease and death for thousands of workers. And in the Book of the Dead, which is really a sort of foundational text in what we now call documentary poetry, at least in the United States. And in the Book of the Dead, a sprawling poem which demonstrates just how much imagination it takes to tell the truth, Rukeyser addresses these questions through the poetics of legislative bills, subcommittee interviews and transcripts, tables, equations, monetary calculations, measurements, medical diagnoses, chemical formulations, lists of the dead, testimonies of survivors, legal proceedings, bureaucratic and congressional smokescreens. And all this is accompanied by the lyrical techniques of a poet so far ahead of her time in understanding poetry's ability to document history, the continuums of history, the interlinking violent histories of empire, colonialism, racism, capitalism, technology, modernity, art, identity, and medicine. And as Stacy and I built this piece, those interlinking histories, we were interested in thinking about the interlinking histories of mining, of breathing and breathing diseases, and imperialism, both as they exist in the Americas, as they exist in Africa, as they exist in Europe, and as they inform kind of shared histories. Our interest in Rukeyser, though, is really through the vital contributions to what we are now calling the politics of breath, a concept we explore more fully in our interdisciplinary collaborative project with University of Chicago anthropologist Kaushik Sundar Rajan and South African composer Neo Muyanga. Together, we seek to build mechanisms for shared breathing, what we call breathing machines, in response to the colonial and imperial suppressions of breath. The Breathers is one such machine which might allow us to see the ways in which breathing can be a reparative and radical practice of collectivity. So a few thanks before we start. Thanks especially to our publishers at Chimurenga and everyone there for creating this beautiful book. Thank you to everybody here at the Center for the Less Good Idea for putting this together. And of course, thanks to the audience for being here. And with that, we give you a little bit of the Breathers.
Langston Hughes.
In the Johannesburg mines, there are 240,000 native Africans working. What kind of poem would you make out of that? 240,000 natives working in the Johannesburg mines. Muriel Rukeyser.
Who stands over the river? Whose feet go running in these rigid hills? Who comes, warning the night, shouting and young to waken our eyes? Who runs through electric wires? Who speaks down every road? Their hands touched mastery. Now they demand an answer.
Tunnel number 089A. Tunnel number 09C. Tunnel number 089F. Tunnel number 09H. Choral breathers.
Welcome to
The hovering earth,
the destroyed earth,
the hovering state,
the destroyed state,
the murmuring earth,
the destroyed earth,
the rasping earth,
the body of everyone,
the body of nothing.
the body of the opposite of time.
Welcome to our body.
Welcome to our country.
Welcome to our whole.
These are our hands, begging.
Here is our mouth, begging.
Here is a foot, kneeling.
A leg, traversing a city where weeds grow up between broken concrete.
Here is the bank, the church,
The empty mouth of the corporation.
the stadium, a stampede.
The mine, a massacre.
Here are the statistics.
The shebeen where we lost our virginity. On walls, the torn face of a leader.
The bins behind the KFC where the bones pile up.
The stains round our mouths. Welcome to the rasping, the echoing, the murmuring, landscape blasted, mass graves, disappearance. The body is dug up, the body is dug into, the sick, the diseased, the criminal, the coughing trees, the stones scattered, the blood in the valley, the tunnels drilled into the bodies, drilled into the mine shafts, the sinkholes, the workers who cannot be who they are, the bodies who cannot breathe the way they want to breathe, the space confined, the body confined, the frame confined, the exploding murmur, the diffusion of dust, light, gag, disease, the collapsing body, the collapsing frame, the collapsing tunnel, the workshop of breath, the critique of breath, the form of breath. You are not breathing the right way. You are not dying the right way. You cannot moan, mourn, or pray this way. The quantification, the whole in the whole of the body.
The sinkhole, the pit mine, the pit latrine, stink hole, air hole, the manhole of my country, and the cunt hole of my humanity, the interrupted hole of the revolution and the leaking hole of the extraction, the holes in our bodies indicated only by large symmetrical bilateral opacities on X-rays in a steel filing cabinet in a state hospital, the multiple holes in the leader's chest, the terror contained in the whites of the eyes in an image of a man in front of a firing squad dated 3rd of May, 1808, dated 17th of January, 1961. A body dissolved in sulfuric acid, weeping into the soil of an unnamed African country. A gold tooth in the pocket of a Belgian soldier, a cavity in the colonial archive, the daughter of a hole of a hole of a hole who said he was not a serious man after all. The holes that statement eats in language, like the frightening hole on the back of a baby's head, the fontanelle, like the depression in the pillow, the mattress, the depression of eyeballs through eyelids with the heels of my hands. Franz Fanon.
When the colonized escapes the doctor and the integrity of his body is preserved, he considers himself the victor by a handsome margin. When the advantage assumed by the colonizer is limited to swallowing pills or potions, the colonized has the impression of having won a victory over the enemy.
That's great. So we'll have a bit of a conversation. Number one, shall we say. The Breathers is the name of the project. How does that relate to what you spoke about in terms of the movement of capital, particularly over the last century? And how do you come together to discuss that in these forms?
I suppose in some ways it's interesting that we just read Fanon, because it was really possibly Fanon who in many ways provoked this. There's a beautiful passage in Fanon, one very small passage, where he talks about this idea of breath as a form of resistance, and the possibilities of breath as a way of both being suppressed, the suppression of breath. He terms it combat breathing. And for him, combat breathing is both the fact that you have to become, under colonialism, one becomes conscious of one's breath, and what should be an automatic process actually becomes a conscious process because you are so suppressed and you're having to actually remind yourself to breathe. And at the same time, within that of combat breathing is also the possibility of breath as resistance. And I suppose this work sits somewhere in between trying to document that breath as suppression, but also through a form, poetry and music and art as forms of breath and resistance, and then collective breathing as well, which the project was done collaboratively, which was a really important part for it, that combat breathing in the way that our protests, as you know too well, have always been collective practices, that harnessing that idea of collective breath and collective breath as resistance.
Yeah, no, and I would add the project in many ways formed as well as at least this specific project as a response to Muriel Rukeyser's book about the mining disaster in West Virginia, which was it's So I'd been invited to write an essay for an anthology responding about Rukeyser, and I didn't want to do either the essay or to write it alone. And so I made it part of this larger project that we were already working on. And what happens in the 30s in West Virginia is something which is replicated in mining contexts throughout history and throughout the world, essentially. The workers were getting infected in massive numbers with silicosis, many of them dying. Many of the workers there were migrants who had come to the area specifically to work there, many of them Black. And so I think the question that is sort of being raised through mining practices is what happens when profit depends on the suppression of workers' ability to breathe, right? And so that is magnified in that particular moment, but like I said, is replicated in mines throughout the world and certainly throughout the 20th century. And so I think that question was at the center of it. And then I think, of course, the pandemic puts a different kind of spotlight on the question of breathing as well, where breathing becomes this thing that is actually separating us, right? And we are fearful of other people's breath and meant to both protect ourselves from other people and suppress our own breath. And that so many, again, the kind of, at least in the United States, what we were seeing is the ways in which breathing and the suppression of breath is worse in poor and minority communities as it is in wealthier ones. And so all of that, I think, was happening.
And yeah, and I mean the parallels between what Daniel's talking about in America and I think in South Africa are brutally apparent. And you know, the project is very much rooted, as Daniel says, in these mining histories, but there's always been something in Daniel's poetry that's radically intrigued me, which is this giving voice to the dead. And I think a lot about breath and death, but also the breath being the ghost, that very often when the ghost enters the room, there is this breath or this wind or this air moves. Somehow ghosts can move air in our imagination. And so much of Daniel's work creates almost a cosmology of another world whereby those people who are, who have been annihilated by forms of radical capitalism get voice again. And I think it drawing from that deeper history of Daniel's practice of trying to give voice to those who seemingly have no voice, but actually do and speak through music and poetry in our heads and find voices or sees our bodies possess us in strange ways.
I paraded this and I will do it again. This is the book that we're launching tonight of the Breathers. It's a beautiful edition published by Chimurenga. It's being sold outside, but I'm referring to it because on one hand, the publishers are very central to my relationship to Stacy Hardy, my sister Sledge. We've been working together for many years, and we met because of Chimurenga, the journal, and then we did a project called the Pan-African Space Station, which we're all very proud of. And a lot of the design features in this book show some of the work of our brother Graham Aransa, who's a wonderful visual artist. But from there, Stacy, we went on to work on a project. We were based in Cairo for many, many months, repeatedly, over a period of 2 years, which was about breath and breathers and capital and this connection that Daniel points to, about TB, and how TB was considered in other parts of the world as a disease of the 20th century, but in fact TB was experiencing a resurgence in the world And we were touring this work, and people were saying to us, why do you make a project about TB, which has been already eradicated in the world? And that was my connection to breath with you, Stacy, and the breathing machine conversation that then connected us to Daniel.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about that connection to breathing and our story with Laila Soliman and Nancy Munir?
Absolutely, and a very transformative and life-changing thing. And on a side note on breath, I always remember I'm a very shallow breather, as you can hear when I talk and I read sometimes. And Neo had the task of trying to warm my voice up and getting me to breathe down into your diaphragm, Stacey. I still get haunted by Neo's, in the middle of the night, giving me instructions to do and telling me to shoot my voice across and hold a piece of paper up on the wall with my breath across the room. Anyway, but that's an aside. I suppose the project is really rooted in my own, I think sometimes research projects, we go to them because something intrigues us or we come across something, but this was a research project that literally came to me through the air and infected me. Which was that I got TB and it went undiagnosed for 8 years. And I suppose what really happened with that, when it was finally diagnosed, I was quite excited, of course, because finally what I've been telling doctors for 8 years, that there was something wrong with me, was affirmed. And I was very intrigued about tuberculosis. And anyone who knows anything about TB knows that it leaves holes in your body. And holes are another recurrent image in this work, and that pop up. There are holes in everything. There are holes in the system, holes in bodies. But holes are, of course, also the way we communicate and the way we make love and all these kind of things. But TB eats literal holes in your body, and I can only describe it as I followed the holes in my body and I exited into a mine shaft. Because that is the history of this country and tuberculosis in this country. And that led me to start to ask a lot of questions around the economics of disease and these kind of things, which is very much, I suppose, also, I think that I was quite surprised and a bit overwhelmed when Daniel suggested we collaborate. But in many ways, we've been working with a lot of the same questions because holes and blanks are things that reoccur in all of Daniel's poetry. And I've been a fan for Daniel. For anyone who knows me, all my friends, oh God, no, she's bringing out the Daniel Borzutzky book again. I've been running around chasing people with Daniel's books and saying, wait, have you read this guy? Yeah.
That's what you told me. You said, meet my favorite poet ever.
Let's change this.
Anyway, so in that way, I mean, how else do you get to be on stage with your favorite poet ever and your favorite musician ever? I mean, am I awake? Is this a dream? Are you guys real?
Fred, you're reading parts that are titled Machine. Can you explain more about that? Because a lot of what I've been interpreting here is, of course, the mechanized system in capital, but also in this industrial revolution.
It's there's that moment of the depersonalization, like this layer between the people and the power structure and the labor. And to me, as I read it, I didn't write it. These two collaborated on. I'm here as a voice in the collaboration. When I read these machines, I'm reading this ability to create a layer of, or a buffer of kind of plausible deniability of the system that is, small c, conservative of that system or protective of that system, and allows for that system's perpetuation and a soft violence, a depersonalized violence, and suppression of. And you'll hear it as we read through. You'll hear it in the kind of one thing that I know Daniel likes to work on in his texts is the language of economics and the language of business and the ways in which that carries a kind of
Poetics.
yeah, like a very sickening and but also a set of codes. And I think that those things exist in that text.
I would also
really
like to say that
fascinating.
I'm quite sympathetic to the machines. I mean, this is after all a project about building breathing machines. So I don't necessarily see the machines as enemies. I think that they're amongst the most wretched of the earth.
Yeah.
And that the problem is that we have not conscientized them, which is the whole AI project that's failing horribly. But we, you know, that they are actually the most enslaved and suppressed of anything. And one of the things I love about musicians is I think musicians have the magic of liberating machines momentarily from their, you know, from their absolute suppression under capitalism, where they're made to be vacuum cleaners and other things, which actually make glorious sounds. But musicians capture some of that and give life to them. So it's also an attempt to let the machines have some poetics too.
I like it.
I would just add one small comment, which also, as we were writing this on a very personal note, my father, who's older, has been suffering with heart disease and has needed to get a ventilator, a breathing machine at home. And as we were writing this, the sort of irony was occurring that we were having arguments with the insurance company about how much oxygen he could actually use from the machine and how much they would allow us to use and what that would cost, right? And so the sort of irony of having to confront, on the one hand, like the miracle that such machines exist, and on the other hand, the idea that they are actually limited by how much you can actually pay for air.
We're gonna ration your air after a certain point. The air's on you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was it. Yeah.
Welcome to the 21st century.
Exactly.
Shall we do a little bit more reading?
Sure.
So we're going to go
Starting 13.
to more of the chorus.
Yeah, it's 13
Hey.
on your text. Yeah.
Got it.
Choral breathers.
The body of the state,
The body of the market.
the body of the colonizer.
The body must remain quarantined.
And this is an end, not a means.
What?
This is an end, not a means.
What?
This is not the means to this end.
What do you mean?
What do you mean?
We don't want our bodies to end.
We don't want our faces, our livers, our kidneys to end.
We don't want the road to end.
We didn't know we loved breathing so much until they told us we couldn't breathe.
We didn't know we loved gasping so much until they told us we couldn't gasp.
We didn't know we loved the sieges, the panic, the amplification of the voice, the body that is not a cyborg.
We love the actual body.
We love skin, earth, hair, earth, sorrow, earth.
We did not know how much we loved our deterioration.
But there you have it.
There is nothing to see here.
The mouth is not the mouth you think it is.
The mouth is not the thing that is moving, talking, breathing, living, loving, breathing, breath, blood, miracle.
New map of the Americas, number 502.
Breather 3.
Tell me your pain, your naked page of fear, my heritage. Somewhere bodies are being broken so that we can live. Somewhere bodies are being asphyxiated so that we can breathe. You, a heart with no body, me, a nobody without a mouth. Put my name between your name and call it collaboration. Put it down, further down. Hide my mouth in your mouth. cavity. Bury my palate in the dark of your mouth, a tooth for a tooth. Reach down into my throat and make an inventory of our losses. An iron deficiency, a breath deficiency, a deficient body, a deficit body. The process whereby a body becomes whole. Stare into the hole you have made of my mouth, the death cell that is my mouth, the cell death that is my mouth, the screen that is my mouth. List the names of the people who have died in my country so you can stare into the screen that is my mouth in your country. In my homeland, my father says, I'm going to kiss you so you can listen to my fishes. To destroy you, I give you this territory, this country of blood rivers, white, devil, thorns. I'm going to remake you in my image because I love you. I place my finger in your mouth because I love you. I put my hands over your eyes. I bind you to my blood.
Choral breathers.
Breathe.
X,
Breathe.
X,
Breathe.
X,
Breathe.
X.
Breathe. Breathe. Breathers. Breathe the beginning of our breath.
Breathe,
X.
breathe,
X.
breathe,
X.
breathe,
X.
breathe.
Breathe. Breathers. Breathe the end of our breath. Mafika Pascal Gwala.
A ghetto sundown, South Africa coughs dust into the streets of Alexandra, cough with the smell of blood, blood stained from white policy murders at Langa, Sharpeville, Muyanga, Cartonville. Breather 2. Question.
What size should the tunnel be?
Question.
What size should the tumor be?
Question.
What size should the subsidiary be?
Question.
What size should the state be?
I was developing a healthy breathing relationship to power. No, I was developing power. I myself was power. This is not the richest depository. The voice said,
Question.
what is the least, most dignified way to treat a body?
I found my body on the freeway. It was not as obliging as I thought it might be. I searched for a certain kind of blood, a certain kind of breath in the blankness of the bureaucracy. This is the general history of my condition. I was standing against a breathing machine I had never before seen, and when I stared into its mouth, I heard, "Your body is as blank as my blank."
Machine 1.
Please prove you are human. Click the boxes that contain open pit mines. Click the boxes that contain unidentified bones resurfacing from unknown grave sites or abandoned mine shafts. Click the boxes that contain ramps and ramps and ramps and train tracks. Click the boxes that contain tear gas canisters. Click the boxes that contain catheters, clenched fists, the corrosion of personhood. Click the boxes that contain a landscape without a focal point, that contain darkness and nothing else, that contain segmental or lobar airspace consolidation, ipsilateral hilar and mediastinal lymphadenopathy, and or pleural effusion in the x-rays of the lungs of the patient.
It's not just the text that you made together, which I'm curious about. How do you work a text together as two writers? But also you've made this film. You've made these sketches. Can you talk a little bit about your process towards that?
I mean, I think in terms of what writing together, while it seems to be an uncommon practice, I think both Daniel and I are very aware of that writers are always writing collaboratively. Even when you're sitting alone in your little room, you're writing collaboratively because you're writing in conversation with other writing. And this project, we very much, I think, try to foreground that by putting our voices in amongst other poets. So there are many other poets who appear and are among the ghosts that haunt this text. And poets from across the world, from Chile, from South Africa, from the Americas, are all woven with our voices. So I think that practice of writing together always happens on some ways anyway. And this was a foregrounding. But it's also incredibly challenging. And one of the things that I specifically, just speaking for myself, found challenging in it was that Daniel has this enormously powerful style and voice, and very specific and identifiable. And it was, how do you speak or let your voices sing together without losing your voice and becoming somebody else? So that dance, and I can only call it a dance, I think we danced together, was for me one of the real challenges. I don't know, Daniel, if you have something to say on the writing process.
Sure, yeah, I mean, it is a real joy to be able to work collaboratively, precisely because of what you were talking about towards the end, which is that you have the opportunity to get out of your voice a little bit. And of course, we never completely lose that, but at least in collaboration, as in any kind of collaborative project, as in collaborative music or other forms of theater or collaborative art making, you have to be listening very closely, I think, to what the other person is doing and trying not to do precisely what you would do if you were by yourself. And so there's something very wonderful about that. In kind of practical terms, there was a real kind of, I would write a page and send it to Stacy, who would continue it, and that went on. We probably had a draft of something within a matter of months, but then the editing was really where that fusion came together. And I think as we look at this, I think we both have the experience of, there's pages I can identify where I wrote, but there are definitely pages where I can't identify who wrote what and where I think we melded things together. And so I think a lot of that happened in the editing of it. And so then to speak to the kind of visual art practice as well, I was starting to make drawings I won't say seriously, but I was spending a lot of time doing it in a way that I hadn't done ever before. And this was also kind of opportunity to think about, well, to sort of drop them in. And that also prompted, our drawings prompted responses, visual responses, that were both drawings in response to the drawings that were also in response to the text. So that was interesting, different, wonderful, but also I think gave us a chance to kind of expand the parameters of the book a little bit as well.
Two things to say. The first of all is that there is a prize for anyone who can accurately and correctly identify who wrote what in the book, that you get a free ventilator. So please do send your submissions in. But then also to say one of the beautiful things that Daniel said to me when he said, I'm doing some drawings, why don't you do some drawings too? And I went, I can't draw. And Daniel said, yes, me neither, it's fantastic. Because you're not like, unlike writing, which we think we know and become so labored, and that there's a wonderful freedom in doing what you don't know how to do, and without any expertise or pretense of expertise, that allows just a joyous kind of freedom. And I got very infected and produced like much too much artwork just because it was like, oh wow, we can just do what I don't know how to do. And I think in some ways this project is do what you don't know how to do to find out what you don't know you know. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Oh, that's great. That's beautiful. There's also a lot of conversation that we've been having today and that you referred to around listening and responding. And it reminds me very much of these traditions that we have in South Africa very strongly, this antiphony, this call and response, which in Chicago is a very big thing too, particularly in the south side of Chicago. Yeah. And the project for us really was based around the Neubauer Center and this, it was called the Pulmonographies project that we did with Kaushik, where they had me on Zoom talking to students for 4 hours at a time together. And I thought it was a bit mad. What is the connection between your Breathers project and Pulmonographies?
I mean, I suppose the Breathers, the Pulmonography became a way to get money out of an American university to do all sorts of crazy things, which we told them were breathing machines. And we theorized this very solidly, so that they took it all very seriously and went, wow. And we managed to start as a breathing machine, a jazz band, and play for Asher Gamedze to do a jazz band in both Chicago and South Africa. And that album is going to come out in the next few weeks. So do keep watching social media. We will publicize it when Asher's album comes out. We managed to pay for Neo to start a choir with a wonderful choir group with youngsters in Cape Town, which is still going. Yeah. And we called that a breathing machine. And then we said, well, we were also writing a poetry book, and it's also a breathing machine. So we basically managed to get a lot of money to do all sorts of fantastically mad and wonderful things that we call breathing machines. So, if anyone's looking for good money schemes, building breathing machines is the way forward. It's the future.
COVID taught us to be suspicious of breath, though. One of the first things that was outlawed was singing together, no?
Yeah.
Which is why people in Italy started singing to each other on these balconies. And this act of communion, passing each other, not just voice, but germs, was almost eradicated. Fortunately, we've got a shared germ regime back. Is there any conversation that you're having? We talked about robots, cyborgs, which is interesting to me. But is there any conversation in your work around disease and incorporating and assimilating disease? And I'll give you a bit of a frame. When we did the project around TB, one of the key texts that we were working on was a text by what was called the Socialist Patient Committee, Socialist Patient Movement in Germany. And these were a group of patients in a mental asylum. And they wrote a manifesto. And it was, we live in a sick-making world. To be healthy in a sick-making world is abnormal. And it reminds me, it chimes quite a lot with the apartheid slogan of how can you have normal culture or normal sport in an abnormal society? You know? So do germs, do these organisms that we live with enter into your conversation?
What do you?
Yeah, no, I think so in lots of ways. One specific place to think about. I mean, I think there's specific things. I think there's a sort of conceptual way to address it too. But we started in the first series that we read. We concluded with Fanon and his writing about medicine and colonialism, and I think that that was particularly important to me as he was talking about the ways in which medicine functions as a imperial imposition on colonialist peoples. And so the need to cure in very specific ways, the need to pathologize in very specific ways, the need to diagnose and find a very specific form of response was what Fanon was getting at and criticizing and linking to practices of colonial oppression. So I think that was there. I think from the sort of perspective of minors, Rukeyser was in particular thinking about lung disease and silicosis as a response to mining, and so that was in there. I believe tuberculosis was also in the mix for her as well. And then I think disease, as sort of taking the word apart, dis-ease as a kind of general frame of writing was, I think, sort of central to the feeling of trying to write the piece. So to be outside of easiness, to have a kind of to be working with infection and both sort of thinking about infection as a medical problem, but also thinking about infection as a creative aesthetic at the same time as well.
And that we infected each other in some ways, that your voice gets infected by another poet,
Right.
and your, that form of infection is also, I think, central to it.
There's that wonderful arts festival in Cape Town called Infecting the City.
Yeah. And then there was a wonderful response that cropped up, which was called Disinfecting the City, which was the Fringe Festival that grew up around.
Should we do one last pocket
Sure.
of reading?
Yeah.
Yes,
Where are we starting?
Coral Readers,
24.
The Mountain and Its Choking.
Okay,
I'm going to wait for you to start this time.
sure.
Coral Breathers.
There is a mountain and it is choking. We see thousands of bodies trapped in the mountain and they are choking, but we cannot distinguish the bodies from the mountain. And when we say the bodies are choking, we mean the mountain is choking. There is a wall made of dust, but it is not fragile or impermanent. It is solid dust. It is hard dust. It is a kind of dust that stands still and also breaks into fragments, into little bits that find a diseased home in my nose, my lungs, my blood, my breath, my kidneys. Breather 4.
I dig nights. I dig days. I bury. I bury. I bury. I sleep in my shoes. Machine 2.
Please complete the following. Injured while performing activity. Nature or type of injury. Accident, A. Or a dangerous occurrence, B. Part of the body injured and type of accident for individual. Fatal, F. Injury, I. Totally disabling, T. Fit yourself into this equation. Allocated days lost, and assign a monetary value to be completed by Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, of Labor, of Justice.
The orderly.
I load the trolley with my limp body and push it into the eternal darkness that could be a mine or a morgue or a mouth or the endless corridor that runs from point A to point B in a state correctional facility.
Coral breathers.
Welcome to the road that leads to your country.
Welcome to the equation that leads to your body.
Welcome to the balance sheet that calculates the worth.
Of your diseased flesh.
Your remote flesh.
It is remote.
Your breath.
It is remote.
Your life.
It is remote.
Your power. It is saved, and it is not the end. It has no end. It is lost. It spouts and dances.
What is a river, and how many bodies does it take to drain it? What is an echo, and how many voices does it take to break it?
End stop.
Breath. Period. Breather 2.
Iron. Death. Diversion. Water. Hallucination. Halation. Decadence. Breath.
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 Breath. Machine 16.
Warning. This machine is not currently available. It has started to eat itself, a cybernetic feedback loop turned cannibal that amplifies and magnifies small errors or noise in the system, leading to a cascade of instability and potentially causing system collapse. Please reboot your computer.
Would any of you like to ask a question? We don't have a roving mic, so please ask it boldly, and I'll translate it into microphone speak so that we can record it, and then it will be answered.
The question was what medium we communicated through.
It was largely, it was largely email. Daniel would send me a text, and I would write back to it, and then even I think when we were together, there would always be a kind of awkwardness of not speaking about it. It wasn't like we sat down and talked. Would be like, yeah, I got your email. Yeah, thanks. I'm going to get back to you in a week or so.
I just remembered something. One thing that you get to know about Stacy when you've spent a lot of time with her, Stacy never sleeps. And I think it was while we were in Cairo that you kept receiving these emails, long letters from a writer, and you were writing together. Was that
So
when?
that wasn't Daniel. That was way
this
before
when it was
that. No. That was way before Daniel. Who would that have been?
There are many others in Stacy's life.
I just suddenly remembered that.
I'm very actually shy, and I have a difficulty with friends. So my excuse is always, if I want to be friends with somebody, I can never get up the guts to just say, "Can we go have a cup of coffee?" So what I always say is, "I've got this project. Do you want to collaborate?" And all I want to do is have a damn cup of coffee with that person. And next thing you know, you've got a book out. You know. Well,
I think I instigated this project. You know. But yeah, email. But then I think the I suppose we're still a little bit email, but the drawings in the film changed the medium just a little bit. I think.
Yeah.
So there were sound recordings.
Yes. Oh, here's another question here. Yes.
Why don't you start?
Okay, I'll start. I mean, I think that in some ways, breath is central to poetry. I think poetry is all about the breath in multiple ways because it's about rhythm and voice, which is about breath. But there's also Celan. Paul Celan, the wonderful poet, has this wonderful term that translates as breath turn, which is what he calls the line break. It's that space that he understands or interprets the line break as what he calls breath turn. That place where breath turns and the poem turns in on itself or flips or another momentum is given. And that's his understanding of the line break. And I've always loved that interpretation. There are many readings of what is the line break. What is this thing that we suddenly put in and we break our sentences? And I always loved that because, of course, it is breath on the level of it's the pause or it's the gap in which we breathe into, but it's also the breath turn. So I think that there's something essential in poetry that's phenomenal about breath. And then I've always struggled to breathe. I'm somebody who breathes too shallowly. When I get agitated, I start to hyperventilate. Yeah. And Daniel, your side?
Yeah, I think breath as a medium for writing certainly is at the roots of the writing part of it, and that when one is writing, it is happening in your body and coming out. How you deliver it, how you hear it in your head, even I think is deeply connected to your breath. But then I came along into this project rather later, and this notion of the breathing machines and the connections between the histories of colonialism and the suppression of breath was very well developed already. And so I think that on the one hand, breath is like a aesthetic device, and on the other hand, it's something that we're sort of fighting against these questions of suppression of breath at the same time, right? And at the same time, at least, again, in the United States, we have the context of COVID, we have the aftermath of police killings of Black men, where the phrase "I can't breathe" is becoming part of the resistance idiom as well. So all of those things were circulating at the same time as we were writing and thinking, I think.
Maybe if I can also pull friendship in here, because I think, we just were in Cape Town and we launched this at Chimurenga, and one of the joys about being amongst friends or going back home is it's like you can suddenly breathe. And one of the joys of being on stage with somebody like Neo and Daniel and Fred is I feel like I can breathe. And I think that there is a way that friendship also, in collaboration, I think collaboration is one of the intense forms of friendship. And I've certainly, by collaborating, made some of the best friends I have in the world. And I think that there's a way that our friends allow us or facilitate us to breathe. So maybe friends are breathing machines.
It's lovely. Another question here? I will just translate that. So that's a point about dependency, maybe not necessarily codependency, but how we lean on each other and how breathing machines help us remain connected to life and maybe to each other as well. Yes. And? And the opposite of war. Right.
No, I think that absolutely, it's a way that, you know, it is via others, and it is via collectivity and via friendship and via other people that you can be vulnerable. And I think in some ways, you know, this is the first time I've ever drawn anything before. Certainly publicly, I mean, I've drawn a lot, but never put anything out there. And it's also, you know, really my first poetry book. And I think that there's a way I was emboldened by Daniel saying, yeah, this is great, yeah, you know. And, you know, I said, but I'm not a poet. And Daniel said, oh, what's a poet anyway? What's a poem? You know, and so I think there's also a way that we can be vulnerable when we are collectives. It allows for us to be vulnerable. And there's also a way where you can kind of feel safe, because if you're going to fuck up, there's someone there to catch you. And, you know, and to tell you, no, that line, let's take that out, Stacy, you know.
Yeah. We could take 2 last questions from the floor, if anyone is burning to ask, or comment. One here. That's good. Breath is never done alone. We breathe in concert, we breathe in communion. And so what has this project done to your breath? Your relationship to breath?
It's been a breath of fresh air for me to be really corny. I mean, it really has. You know, that sounds terribly corny, but it really has been a breath of fresh air. It's also pushed me. And then in the way that somebody else's breath infects your breath, it changes how you breathe somehow. And the opportunity to breathe across oceans and to breathe across worlds to those who are no longer breathing as well, you know, because it has been a way to try to go, you know, what are the voices of those whose lives, you know, I always say we make our lives by the deaths of others, and I think a similar line occurs in this work. And that we are here and breathing is in many ways because others have died. You know, we are always making our lives of the deaths of others, our technologies, our productions, all of those. We all have a culpability to this, and we all carry a lot of dead with us, and at least let us breathe for them. And let us all keep breathing, please.
I would say 2 things. One is, I feel like it's made me it's made me conscious of a few things, but one, it has given me the idea that I hadn't quite had before, that breathing is itself a topic for writing, right? And that it is sort of as simple as that in a certain sense, right? That to be alive is to be breathing, and the mere fact that you went to a breath workshop, I don't know what happens there, but I love the idea, and that that's something that ought to be, that we think of as being simple, is perhaps something that like benefits from being taught or doing with other people in that kind of way. So I think that's one thing I would say. And then I think the other is, I guess made me realize, again, with the sort of confluence of living with, having someone with breathing with a respiratory disease, but also again, in the aftermath of the pandemic, has just made me aware of how complicated it is to do well, right? Like we take it for granted when we can breathe, right? But that it is actually the moment it stops, the moment something interrupts that, everything goes haywire, and that is and thus the complication of having to live with that is I think very present with me as well.
And we'll have one last question at the back.
Hello, everybody. I guess this is a comment, a question, everything in one, you know. Yeah, there's something about breathing that is somehow, to me, there's an evil that you can find in breathing, I guess. You know, thinking about smoking, you know, we're doing the right thing, but it also matters what you breathe in, right? It also matters what you breathe out. When we attend like your meditation sessions with friends, you know, when you have someone instructing you on how to breathe, they tend to instruct like breathe in life, breathe out the toxicity, you know, but sometimes we breathe in toxicity and breathe out more toxicity, right? I just want to comment on the collaborative, you know, exchanging bars. It felt like a jazz concert where one takes 8 bars, does a solo, and the next comes in. I'm also thinking about how you are collaborating, how you breathe collectively, right? It also says to me you are able to breathe in your individual spaces, in your own corner. Therefore, it makes it easy to breathe around, you know, a collective, right? And going back to COVID, how COVID, we're breathing nicely together. Right? And now we're forced to go to our corners and figure out if we can breathe, and we found that, hey, it's tough to breathe alone, right? But it was also a beautiful moment to learn how to breathe. Just to share an interesting detail about my life, I decided to walk with a friend of mine. We decided to walk from Jozi to Cape Town.
Wow.
And, you know, at some point we ran out of water, but somehow we came to a point where we said, hey man, we only have oxygen to depend on. So somehow we need to use breath to give us more energy to walk. Every morning I pray, and how I pray is I breathe in and breathe out a vowel or something, you know. And I say the words, I recite the words in my head, in my heart. And I realized how breathing is prayer in itself, you know. Being present, I guess. You've spoken about a lot of things, being present, and feeling the holes in my body. You know. It's one thing to feel oxygen through your lungs, you know. Because when I smoke, I mean, I'm trying to quit, but you know, when I smoke, you know, I can somehow feel lomoya, you know, if I could say, I can feel lomoya coming through my lungs, mess me up, right? Yeah, I'm all over the place. One last detail.
I'm going to have a problem giving a précis to what you said. I'm already apologizing.
So one of the things I learned also when I got to Cape Town, I'm experimenting, doing solo performances. I've done a lot of collective breathing, right? And I got to a point where collective breathing doesn't make financial sense. So let's find a way to I can breathe alone, so. So I'm doing solo performance, and now I'm forced to sing, because I don't have a vocalist, I don't have horns, I don't have either playing keys or guitar, like that Muyanga. And it's something that I've come to learn in practicing, in playing solo and trying to breathe alone on stage. My tutors would always say to me, whenever you play, try to breathe. Whenever you take a solo, try to breathe, because when you don't breathe, you end up expressing all of your ideas in one song. And by the time you have to solo in the next song, you've run out of stuff to say. one of the most beautiful things I experienced in Cape Town, and I guess being on stage alone, is dying and resurrecting on stage. I would sing my lungs out so much that transcend somehow, and I carry everyone else with me. But the moment I come back and I think about breathing, you know, I experience some sort of death. Right? It's as if the more we sing, the more we are present. Like singing is breathing, is praying, is life. If you can't sing it, you can't play it, right? And also to say, everyone who's here, whether you play an instrument or not, I think Almighty has given us something beautiful, our voices, right? Everyone is to sing because our voices are instruments, and thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm done.
I mean, just for the benefit of the recording, I'll try and touch on some of it, but I'm not going to touch all of it. The idea of breathing is resurrection. So on stage, when you perform, it's like a death, and then breathing is a resurrection. You started with breathing in toxicity when you smoke, and then you talked about meditation, where you're taught to breathe in the healthy and to breathe out the unhealthy.
And I
Thank
also
you.
really love the breath as energy. That breath is actually what gives us energy as well. I think that that's really powerful. And I'm also feeling very sheepish because I'm straight after this, going to run outside and light a cigarette. So, anyway.
Well, we're almost there. Fred, would you like to give the last word and statement?
Oh gosh. Well, first of all, thank you to the two of you, and to you also for incorporating me into the performance. It's been super wonderful as somebody who, you know, I'm a very dedicated distance runner as part of my writing practice, my art practice, and so I'm very conscious of breath, and I'm very conscious of how that constitutes rhythm and how that can change in very, very subtle ways. And so I'm always thinking of that as a very solitary act, and so I love this reflection on it as an element of community and of like a centeredness with other people. I find those two things very intriguing. And that question that came up, how is it informing your practice? This project is very exciting for me because it's reminded me of some of the ways in which every breath we take and every breath all of us take is in some ways a political act. And I'm embarking on a collaborative project with a group of an artist in Mexico and another artist in Chicago that is going to be thinking about ash, volcanic ash and the ash from fires and the memories of fires as we, and so being here, having been brought here to a city that is constantly burning in its own ways has been a very fascinating way for me to start to conceptualize that project in new ways. So, yeah, great gift.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking Stacy Hardy, Daniel Borzutzky, and Fred Schmalz.